Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, June 6th, Project Prospect Edition. Derek Van Riper, Eno Sarris, Chris Welsh, all here with you for what is the beginning of a new era of Reds baseball, which I hope was written in the RotoWire player note by my good friend Clay Link. Elly De La Cruz has been promoted by the Reds. It has finally happened after all of our frustrations and whining and hoping and praying. It has finally happened. And look, this is going to be a big part of the show today because we're excited about it. We've seen the improvement in the strikeout rate this year, down to a 26.9% K rate at AAA. If you are not familiar with Elly De La Cruz for some reason, that is a big deal. This is a guy that's run 30% K rates at other stops, but he's very young for the level. Walking 14% of the time, which is great even when you account for the automated balls and strikes system at AAA. So it's not just the byproduct of that. And of course, the tools are off the charts. Hits the ball extremely hard as anyone you're going to find in the minor leagues. Can run. We're talking about a possible 5-category player. So, Welsh, I know you have been amped up for this. You were actually on a live stream when the news broke earlier. So, very fortunate timing with this happening before our pod today. But pie in the sky, immediate expectations for Elly De La Cruz are probably going to push bids in redraft leagues where he's available, and there's plenty of leagues where he's not, are going to push him through the roof. This is going to be one of the most expensive hitter that you see added in leagues when we get to Fab this weekend.
Yeah. A couple of this. It's funny. I was actually on this tirade of complaining about what the hell are the Reds doing? It made no sense why it didn't happen. If it were to happen in a month, why would it just not happen now? There's no extra advantage. None of it made sense. And I was complaining and what are we doing? I was going to do my little sign I had, the Brandon Pfaadt one of Elly. And then literally as I shut up, I noticed 2 minutes prior, the Reds had given him the call up. The one thing I'll say about this whole thing too, I actually think, and this is not to harp on everybody, but if you're bidding a whole lot on Elly, you did it wrong, because I'm not crazy about you got to go preemptively pick up all these guys left and right, but this is the guy that you preemptively pick up. If you're having to bid for Andrew Abbott, I kind of understand that. We weren't really sure where the Reds were going to go with that. But Elly De La Cruz was definitely somebody that you wanted to jump in on. It's been a phenomenal year. I actually made the change. I know we're going to talk about some of this probably next week. I've got I do monthly dynasty and prospect lists for fantasy are updated. The Athletic, I'll be doing an update on my dynasty list next week. But I made that move to put Elly as number one overall on the prospect list, because there's a clump. There's actually a really nice clump that's sitting in there of, Jordan Walker. Don't fall off of Jordan Walker. Jackson Holiday is insanely talented. I don't know if people even realize in the month of May in his league, he had the best batting average. And this is a guy that got re-promoted, hitting over 400. Jackson Churio belongs in there, but Elly De La Cruz has just become the cream of the crop. I love the ability to lower the strikeout rate. The EVs are world renowned right now. And I look back since May, and this might seem stupid, but this is a big development for him. He had more games from May until his call up without strikeouts than he had multi-strikeout games. And I know that might not seem like a big deal, but it is. This is a guy that's been striking out over 30% of the time, 30.9% in AA last year, 30 in high A, 31 in single A. And he has cut that rate down. He had one really bad game in the last month where he had a 5 strikeout game, but 8 games without strikeouts since May 1st, and only 6 games, I believe, 5 or 6 games that were multi-strikeout games. So it's all coming together, and he's going to take that to become a really big, impactful fantasy option. But we do have to watch what that swing and miss is going to do at the major league level. But this is the guy that you get jazzed up for. I'm not sure there's going to be another guy with the type of buzz. My prediction would be Jason Dominguez would get the same type of buzz simply because his name, if he gets called up later this year. But this is the pinnacle of prospects right now. And he's a must own. Whatever your question is, you have to own him. Eno gets to reap the benefits because everybody in his Otno league was trying to get Elly. You now get to bring Elly up without having to pay the price or make a move.
Yeah. Should I
Yes.
be the cold water?
Yeah. Try to be the cold water.
Let's go. Talk about strikeouts and the swing and miss rate.
Yeah, it's cold water. Nobody likes this guy.
You want the projections?
Nobody likes this guy.
They're on your side.
I just did a simple query. Age 21 or less in AAA since 2010. Now, there's just one thing that's that I have to say right away, which is kind of amazing. There's only been 33 player seasons like this since 2010. So just the fact that he's 21 and made it to AAA is weird. He's already on a list that includes Kyle Tucker, Ozzy Albies, Anthony Rizzo, Will Myers, Ahmed Rosario, Corey Seager, Manny Margot. I mean, these guys are, a lot of them are big leaguers. However, all those guys that I just mentioned, strikeout list. And so I just sorted this list of 33 players, all 21 and younger at AAA, qualified bats. And I sorted them by strikeout rate. Number 1, which is actually a pretty good comp, maybe, Javy Baez.
Okay.
That's not good cold water, but it exists. Number 2, here's where the cold water starts. Domingo Santana. Number 3, John Kensky Noel. Number 4, Franklin Barreto. That name gives me shivers.
You're right. Nobody likes this guy, Nobody likes this guy.
Nobody likes this guy. Tyler Soderstrom, Elly De La Cruz. Tyler Soderstrom is doing it this year, so kind of hard to say anything about that. And then there's actually a 4 percentage point drop between Elly De La Cruz at 6 and Willy Adames at 7. So I would have to say that I think a really good outcome for Elly De La Cruz is like a Willy Adames with more power.
Are you talking about a rookie year outcome, or are you talking about peak year outcomes?
Yeah,
I think
career.
it's very important to clarify this.
Why am I not talking about peak? I mean, I'm comparing them as 21-year-olds in AAA.
Right, but you're talking about what we're going to get, or likely what we're going to get from Elly De La Cruz as a rookie, because this is where the tension.
I was talking about sort of peak, but
okay, you're talking about peaks, because I think there's two pretty big conversations. It's like, well, what is he going to do right now, and then what is he going to become later? And there's that tension messes with Fab every week. It messes with drop decisions. It messes with the conversations people have on their podcasts and things they write, because you write off a player temporarily, and it doesn't mean you don't like them in the long-term future. It just means you don't like them right now.
Right. So
where are you really at?
As Mr. Coldwater, I'm going to finish throwing the cold water on, because I was talking about sort of peak and career arcs. So I think there could be something similar to Elly's career arc to Willy Adames with more power and speed. That would be a really good outcome. I think a Javy Baez career in general could be one of the outcomes for Elly De La Cruz, which would be great in the short run, but may have some ups and downs. And then if you want to talk rookie season, Javy Baez is probably the best comp out of all these guys for lots of different reasons in terms of athleticism, power, all these things. This is what Javy Baez did in 2014 when he was called up from AAA with a 30% strikeout rate, 169 batting average, 227 OBP, 324 slugging, 6% walk rate, 42% K rate.
One thing I was going to throw in there too, Javy Baez actually, ironically, might fit this mold, but one of those arguments and it's not everything, but when you're talking about the skill level and stuff, how many of those guys have 117 mile an hour velos on any given night? Like maybe Javy Baez, a lot of those guys, I would also consider that. You know who I was thinking about?
Javy
I did
Baez,
this
112, 113.
Yeah, no, he's like the guy of all those other names you were talking about. He actually might have been relevant of like not hitting 117s, but hitting like 112s, 113s, like on a nightly basis. That was kind of his game. So that's a pretty good comp. I've been sitting on this, and this might be a little too much. I just talked about this on my Prospect One show. Just me ranting into the airwaves, into the universe about things to myself. But I was thinking that what Elly's doing right now reminds me actually a lot of Fernando Tatis Jr. in those early years. And while you were talking, I was trying to kind of take a look here. Prior to his call up, the only difference here is Fernando Tatis actually got skipped from AA into the majors and didn't hit AAA. But
so
at AA,
up on my query, right?
Yeah, he might have. But at AA, because he had a similar, if everyone remembers, remember like Derek Carty's projections, it was like everybody, there was the big fight about the talent level versus the strikeout rates. Fernando Tatis Jr. at AA in 2019 or 2018, when he played the full season, 27.7% strikeout rate. In AA in 2017, he played only a little bit, 29.8%. Even in low A, had a 26.5%. So it's not a perfect comp, but it's relative to where Elly is now to where Fernando Tatis was right before the call up. And then he came up, and in his rookie season, Tatis had a 30% strikeout rate, 22 homers, 16 stolen bases in 84 games played. So you actually have a potential for Elly to play a very similar spectrum of what Tatis did, and you've got big hard hit numbers like Tatis. I just think that might be an interesting comp, though. I think there might be a little bit more swing and miss in Elly's game than Tatis. I just feel like that might be a fun comp to kind of sit on, especially in the world of projections and the hard hits. I just don't think there's anybody that compares to Elly outside of maybe Tatis, or your Baez one is actually pretty good.
Yeah, Tatis, I mean, he spent 102 games between 2017 and 2018 at AA before he got promoted. I guess he had another couple in 2019 as well. But the K rate was in the high 20% range, and the walk rate was below double digits. So there were concerns about his plate discipline right away. And I think this is where the age to level conversation and the research that you brought up last week, that's where I'm kind of saying, the strikeout rate, it's a little concerning, but don't lose sight of the 21. Ridiculous tools and what he's doing at his age, and like wipe that away because the strikeout rate's a little higher than you want. I mean, we know the league as a whole strikes out more than it has really at any point since any of us cared about baseball. If you do extraordinary damage and you connect and you have the speed to fall back on, you can do just fine with a 30% K rate upon arrival, and maybe improve that over time, given how young he is. That wouldn't be a surprise at all if 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we're talking about a guy that has whittled that K rate down from the 30% range to the lower 20s or at least the mid 20s. That would make all the sense in the world since he's so young.
Yeah, and also look at some of the patience that has evolved in there. Going back and just doing the Fernando Tatis thing. Fernando Tatis only at one point in his minor league career had like a double-digit walk rate, 14% at low A when he was 18 years old. Otherwise, it was sitting in the 8s. Elly, while lowering his strikeout rate, raised his walk rate 14%. So you saw him learn to cut down. You saw, and especially over time in the season, you saw him readjust there. You saw him walk more. You saw the hard hits at a level I don't know if we've seen in the minors, at least, especially because we can track more than ever. And he has a similar skill set as far as the power speed combo. I know it's absurd because you don't want to do the Harold Reynolds where everybody's Bo Jackson, during the MLB draft. He's like, that guy's like Bo Jackson. That guy's like Barry Bonds. You don't want to do that with everybody. But in Elly's case, this is something I think we can do. I think it's great that you're bringing some of the bad comps in there because all of this excitement I'm throwing at everybody, I actually agree. I think Elly could go through some struggles. We've seen it in the minors. We've seen huge, big strikeouts. We've seen the streakiness. He had a 5 strikeout game less than a week ago. Elly's gonna have some struggles, but Tatis had those struggles, and he has that skill set like Oneil Cruz. There's the other one. Oneil Cruz, regardless of having batting average woes, had that last month where things started to click last season, and you saw the huge hard hit kind of mask some of the problems, and you saw those stolen bases. I think some mixture of Oneil Cruz to Fernando Tatis is where I live with him, but that doesn't mean he's not immune to problems this year because he's a rookie, and we're still seeing him adjust age to level again. The excitement should be there. You should have some cold water, but I don't know if the cold water for me would stop me from jumping all the way in on Elly De La Cruz to own in dynasties and in redrafts. If I have the ability, I want to get him because if he goes on a hot streak and I think there's cold water, you could probably still move him for a king's ransom. So there's not a reason I wouldn't want in any format to own Elly.
So I've got a lot of NFBC leagues are the leagues where Elly's available in the pool this weekend because he wasn't drafted and held this entire time, right? You can't pick up players in the minors unless they were picked up on draft day and then thrown back in the pool. So he's available in a good number of those leagues. I have a league, it's a main event qualifier, 15-team league, and my team's contending. The only spot that matters is winning. My team's got a shot to win. Second place doesn't matter in this league. Here's my situation. Anthony Volpe at short, getting the power, the speed, but low average, struggles we talked about in yesterday's show. And then I'm kind of rotating waiver guys in the middle infield right now. Tucupita Marcano is the current option there. Jose Caballero is on my bench. I mean, in this situation, I've got a pretty good team, a decent amount of fab, and a clear possible upgrade in the middle. That situation is probably one where I'd be about as aggressive as you can be with a player.
Yeah.
Even
World
with the
Series
downside.
of Poker. Push it all in.
Because this is it. This is your shot. Like if first place is all that matters, then or cashing in some cases is all that matters, this would be a spot to do it. So I think your team need always is an important thing to consider with the bid. But Eno is right to bring up Javier Baez. We've seen this with players before. I think the weird thing about O'Neill Cruz, we were watching him last year. We kept saying, come on, bring him up, bring him up, bring him up. And he wasn't that good at AAA. It was 232, 336, 422 was the final line that he had there. They promoted him. The K rate jumped, but the slash line was a little better with the slug and a little worse with the OBP. By WRC plus, he was better at the more advanced level than he was at AAA. Elly's been so much better at AAA than a guy like O'Neill Cruz, where I just think the adjustments, while they're going to happen, I don't think it's going to be quite as harsh as what we've seen with Baez, and probably not even quite as harsh as what we saw for O'Neill Cruz a year ago.
Also, ballpark factors. Think of him. He gets to do all this in Great America Ballpark. Like that's another nice little like tiny added plus we should throw in. Yeah, just help the BABIP exactly for a guy that is going to be absolutely mashing baseballs. So I don't know, if you had any thoughts on like the Tatis and O'Neill Cruz comp.
I think the big difference. I think what might all hang on is chase rate, and I don't think that chase rate is. We talk about it a lot, and maybe we overvalue it. There are players that succeed with high chase rates and so on and so forth. But if you're talking about this set of players, Javy Baez, Fernando Tatis, Willy Adames, the thing that really separates the top end from the bottom end is chase rate. The big thing that really torpedoed Javy Baez's career has been chase rate. And he's never really been below 40%. I mean, he debuted at 39.5, but let's just round that to 40. He's a 40% guy. If you look at Fernando Tatis, he's more like a league average guy, 32, 33. That's league average. I guess the good news on Elly De La Cruz is I've got this piece from Baseball America who says that his chase rates in the minors were 33% and 32%. And so that puts him closer to Tatis than it does to Javy Baez. And I just think that's a little bit of a proxy for like, where are the strikeouts coming from? Are they just coming from just having no idea of where the zone is?
Yeah.
Or are they coming from a power specific approach where he thinks it's going to be a fastball and it's not? And I think it's better to do the latter than the former. The former, when you just have no idea where the zone is, I think you really get into trouble. Because that's two things, right? No idea where the zone is, you can still get screwed on fastball slider, right? But then you can also get screwed on, that's not even close to the zone, dude, Mm-hmm. But if you have an idea where the zone is, then at least you won't do that thing where you've seen Javy Baez do, where he thinks it's a fastball, he swings, and it's a slider in the dirt, and it's just like, you won't necessarily, like, if you do have a sense of the zone, you can be like, well, that's a little too low, even if it is a fastball, because every batter's like, go, no go, right? Like, every batter has to start their swing to hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, so they have to start their swing, and then there's a moment where they say, nope, and they stop. Javy Baez, for some reason, doesn't stop. And it looks like maybe Elly De La Cruz has that ability to stop. His overall swing rate has been down too in this piece that I recommend. and I'm very jealous of JJ Cooper for having these numbers. But he says his overall swing rate is down too. But it was 49% in the low minors, which I think is like, ooh, I can hit the ball 118. I'm gonna swing at everything.
That's what I would do, right? I mean, if I could hit a ball 118, I would try to hit every. That's the problem. That's why I'm nowhere near a professional athlete. I have no discipline whatsoever. If I had a rocket arm, I'd throw my arm out just throwing stupid stuff for no reason.
But down to 42% in AAA. So 42% is actually sort of patient. So you've got a guy who in two very specific cases, how much he swings and how much he chases, is separating himself from Javy Baez. So I think, I think I would put it something like, just to be conservative, I think there's like a 20% chance he's Javy Baez. Yeah, you're like sort of setting a floor at Javy Baez.
That's a good floor, and that's smart to do.
Like sort of 30 to 40% chance he's Willy Adames, who's better than Javy Baez in a lot of ways. Maybe not have the same peak, but better on a year-to-year level, maybe. And then 30 to 40% chance he's Fernando Tatis.
I'd take those odds. Those are pretty good odds that I would battle with. Right now, DVR was mentioning a guy that he has. Would you, not that you have to make this decision, but who would you rather have rest of season, knowing what we know now, Anthony Volpe or Elly De La Cruz?
You just picked up Volpe on Sunday.
I just got Volpe and TGFBI, but there's no way that Elly De La Cruz is going for the 108 I got Volpe for. So if they were the same price, I'd take Elly. Yeah.
Okay, but, I have an NFBC league, by the way, which I picked up Elly 2 weeks ago. Thought I was getting head, and I lost O'Neill Cruz at the beginning of the year, so I get to just play the game
even in the player pool. That means that somebody drafted him and dropped him.
Yeah, he must have been. He was available. I had picked up CES, which I've been sitting on, and I was able to get Elly De La Cruz 2 weeks ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
pretty fun range of outcomes though, and just even the possibility of another Tatis sort of player entering the pool is why we're so excited and why some of us are going to throw absolutely massive bids out there.
And also the last little thing to throw in, look at what the Reds did with Matt McClain, where they immediately threw him in and let him be the number 2 hitter. Start thinking about what if Elly's hitting 4? Like, what if they throw Elly in at 4, probably at worst 5
What
at this point?
What do you think they do defensively?
At third base. I think he's going to third. Nick Senzel went to the IL for this move.
Corresponding move tells us everything.
Well, but when Elly and McClain were playing in AAA together, whenever Matt McClain was shortstop, Elly played third base. So this is actually that corner that they've done before. Elly might be a more natural shortstop, and maybe this comes back to that athletic piece of like, is there something with India if they want Matt McClain to be a second baseman?
I think it'd be really interesting if McClain starts playing some second.
Something to watch, but then what do they do with India? But I think what it is Elly is going to be their third baseman. Yeah, Elly is their third baseman. Second. Maybe they move around, and whenever Nick Senzel comes back, he's out in the outfield. That's done with. Elly's not giving that up. Elly is their third baseman for the rest of the season, unless they did. Now, here's a weird funky one, is what if they said, we want Elly to be our shortstop, we want McClain to be our second baseman, and then Jonathan India flips over to third base. Like, that's a possibility.
But I don't think he has the arm for that.
I don't think so either. So they're going to have to figure it out. That's why I think they're just safe this year with Elly.
I have like 5 middle infielders in my main, and I would just love it for McClain to play third, but I don't think in all these commutations and permutations that McClain ends up at third.
No, McClain's arm, I think they'd like better at second. So Elly's got a huge arm, so he can easily play third, has been doing it. So that's my assumption of where he goes.
Here's a weird thing. So there's Kristen Encarnacion Strand is the open question about like what happens next. While they've done a great job of putting everybody so far, and Encarnacion Strand is kind of, could he be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of where India goes or what happens with India? Also, Joey Votto is struggle bunny right now in the minors. I was really surprised to see this. He's not hitting for power, and he's striking out 41% of the time. How long can they rehab him?
30 days, right? I don't know if he'd stay. I don't know if he wants to do 30 days down there, but it's 30 days.
But he obviously pushed the rehab off. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Like he was like, I'm not ready. And so they put him back on the IL. And I mean, nobody knows you like you. So I don't know if he's still not ready. 114 ISO. He's hit the ball 107.9, which is would put him back 5 years in terms of max EV. 41.5% strikeout is just weird as heck for him. 15% whiff rate. I don't know. Like maybe they just find they're like, nope, he's back on the IL. You know, like
I think he's actually the toughest thing here because I really wish they would just pull the ripcord, because CES makes all the sense in the world to be their DH because he can play some third, he can play some first. Spencer Steer has played so well, and that's been my kind of caveat to jumping all in on Spencer Steer or CES, because I don't know where Votto sits.
How do you fit Steer, Elly, McLean, India, and CES?
Well,
on this
I think
roster?
it's the Votto CES Steers. How do you make that work? Steer can also play the corner. Steer has been phenomenal. Sub 20% K rate, hitting 288, 8 homers, 3 stolen bases. He's projecting out to be close to like an 80 guy, 80 run, 80 RBI. He has been so underratedly good. You can't take him out of the lineup. Also, I think he was the highest WAR Cincinnati Red in the month of May. You can't take him out of this lineup. So how do they? This is why CES, I think, is still down. If they could just, I think, pull the Joey Votto thing and make that go away,
but you can't,
which you hate to see. I know you can't. That's what I don't know how they do it.
Are they going to end Joey Votto's career in Cincinnati with a DFA?
That'd be worse than the possibility of the the Jonathan India moving off his position, or Jonathan India being traded.
Oh my God! Like
who is it more beloved than Joey about that?
Yeah, the unceremonious DFA of Joey Votto would be a horrible plot twist for the Reds. But this is really an impressive.
I suppose they could fall worse behind because their pitching is not quite there. They're 27-33. At some point, you just bring Votto back up for like a farewell tour. Yeah. And that just means that CS maybe they put Votto back on the IL. He comes back off the IL, does another 30, and then comes back later in the season when someone else is hurt, or I don't know. Like it's that is, I think, the last great mystery about the Reds. But
and if the Reds
that's a problem. You could just not play every day. That's an option.
Yeah, you could be a bench. Yeah, but see, the problem is also it's like how many guys can you have that can play first base? You already have Steer, you have CES, like you've got all these guys.
Some people think India is kind of a first baseman.
Yeah, I'd be curious if they made a move in that direction, if maybe they changed positionally some stuff, but also something that'll be interesting to watch is if they treat CES from the school of hitting prospects in what they did with like Elly. They pushed him this whole time. CES is like 3 weeks behind, if you remember. He had like 3 weeks at the beginning of the season. Maybe they've got a set amount of at-bats that they want these guys to get. And, they've got a 2 or 3 week window, because I don't see how much longer they can keep him in the minors and justify, but they've got this roster crunch that maybe they're buying themselves 2 or 3 weeks between the development of what they want him to do in the minors and where Joey Votto's rehab recovers. It's a great problem to have if you're a Reds fan and you're a Reds team, but it's frustrating to see Elly, as long as he was in the minors, and Christian Encarnacion Strand still sit down there when, hitting 300, he had 10 homers over the last 30 days. I mean, he's been a monster as well.
One question that occurs to me when you look at the standings, 27-33, when you listen to us talk about what we think is going to happen with this team, I think one of the big questions is this team good? Because if this team is good, then you don't really want to have Votto up to not play. You'd rather, I think, have Encarnacion Strand up to play first right now than Joey Votto. And so
2 different players too, by the way. Chase rate is like astronomically worrisome about CES, and Joey Votto has always been a patient. So it is very interesting.
Maybe they could hang out together. Are they hanging out together? Where's Votto?
They should mold, become one player. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. They should become.
Yeah, Votto's in AAA. Maybe they could figure something out. But I look at this rotation, and Graham Ashcraft is something that my model really likes, but he's obviously a 2-pitch pitcher with flaws. I think Hunter Green is an ace, and I think he's growing into it. I think another pitch would be good for him, but he's doing, like, I wonder what Spencer Strider would do in Cincinnati. Like it might look a lot like Hunter Green, actually. Although Atlanta's a little bit hitter friendly, there's some similarities there between those two guys that I think that I'm going to call Hunter Green an ace. I'm going to call Ashcraft a project. I'm going to call Luke Weaver the veteran.
That's a
the
nice
veteran hangers on. I'm gonna call Lodolo the possible 2-3 that took a step back. Okay,
Wild card.
the wild card. I'm gonna call Williamson a back end guy. I think he could have some Wade Miley-esque success by doing cutter change. And then new entrant Andrew Abbott.
Yeah.
Who had a really nice debut. The model doesn't love his fastball, but the model is a little bit biased against lefties. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but we did not platoon adjust in Stuff Plus. That happens in Pitching Plus. So there's a little bias against lefties, but still, 90 Stuff Plus on the fastball. I don't think it's a great fastball. He does have a great breaking ball, and he locates it well, and that might be enough to be at least a mid rotation guy. Like, think about it. How much of a league? This is a slider league. He's got a great slider and he can locate it, or he's got a breaking ball and he can locate it. It might be called a curve, and that might be good enough. There's a lot of guys who have success with that as their basis.
Didn't get a lot of swing and whiffs in this first game. I think he had 10 total. Something to watch too. This is something I'm going to pay attention to that I think we saw very early on with like Taj Bradley, Tanner Bybee, and how it adjusts was Andrew Abbott. You can kind of see like with how dominant that big breaking curve, they call it, the curve. There's a sweeper in there as well.
Ball,
yeah. And how he adjusts those, but like how that would be difficult in the minors for guys to deal with. And you could see it in the first end of the majors. He wasn't getting whiffs on the curveball, 11%, 9 swings, only 1 whiff, but 8 called strikes. It ended a 39% CSW. So look at the whiff rate, garbage, but called strikes and whiffs, huge. That was the biggest one because guys weren't ready on how to approach that curveball. So my point is what happens when you're not getting a bunch of swing and whiffs? And then the league adjusts to the curveball. Guys know how to start looking for it more. And he was a 60% fastball guy. I just don't know what that's going to look like. He throws better strikes than a guy like Brandon Pfaadt did, but we're also seeing what's happening with Bryce Miller and what's going to happen.
That's a big adjustment period there too, where it's a great fastball, but the secondaries, don't scare people as much.
Like he's throwing strikes with these, which you weren't seeing from Pfaadt and we're not necessarily seeing from Bryce Miller, which is a good sign. But like, how is this going to mix when there is a better feel for who Andrew Abbott is? I love his ability to throw for strikes, but he gave up like 8 homers in a short stint in AAA. I'm worried about fly balls in that ballpark. And I'm worried about like what level the strikeouts are going to be. But that's me doing the cold water thing on him. It was an awesome debut. Guy gave up 1 hit. I mean, it's crazy.
There's a lot of blue on the Savant page though. If you want to look, it's like negative. It's bad vertical movement on all his pitches.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
I thought his fastball, it had more velo than Eric Lauer's 4-seamer, but it had that sort of like, how are guys not hitting this vibe when I was watching it? It looked like a surprisingly hittable fastball. Brewers have been bad against lefties all season. Second worst WRC plus as a team, 71 actually. So I'm not trying to say that's the reason why he was good in this outing, but they are horrible in that split as much as that could possibly matter. I thought the command of the curveball was a little bit inconsistent. He missed pretty badly, I think, with one to Joey Weimer that went to the third deck, but it was foul by about 20 feet. So that could be a problem if he's not locating that consistently.
Early on it, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the park always scares us away from the more like mid and back end rotation guys. Maybe Abbott's the kind of mid rotation starter that's a little better than average in terms of the strikeout rate, and that makes him pretty appealing for fantasy. But if I'm comparing him to Reese Olson and AJ Smith-Shawver and Brian Wu and the guys we were talking about on the Monday episode,
for me, yeah,
he's definitely behind Smith-Shawver. He's short term, maybe ahead of Wu, because I think the way the Mariners might use Wu could make him pretty frustrating, whereas Abbott has job security. So I think Abbott versus Reese Olson is the more fair sort of toss-up. And Reese Olson's home park gives you so much more buffer.
And Olson is a stuffist with bad command, and Abbott gives me a little bit more of the command and less stuff vibe.
Let me push back on the AJ Smith-Shawver one just for a second, because this is because I was just asking this question earlier today. I think the stuff is better for Smith-Shawver, but I don't think there's a guarantee that he sticks in a rotation. I know they're putting him in Friday, but this comes back to my mix of trying to figure out how the hell teams
that was sort of my read first too. Is like I thought Wu and Smith-Shawver were going to be glue guys rather than necessarily rotation mainstays.
And I've had a bad read on like how teams are approaching. Like I thought Mason Miller had never had a shot at coming up as early as he did with 30 innings, and then bam, he's in the rotation. Smith-Shawver, I have a hard time believing at his age level and where he's gone that they are going to just give him a rotation spot and he's running with it. The Reds have essentially given Abbott
68 innings last year.
They brought him up to be a long relief guy to help the bullpen. Smith-Shawver.
That's how I read it. Yeah.
He pitched 2 1/3 against the Diamondbacks. He was good. His curveball all over the place. He couldn't command it. Slider looked good.
It's really big.
Yeah. And fastball looked good on the command. His first strikeout was against Corbin Carroll. This is all great. I don't get the vibes that they are going to hand the rotation spot rest of season to him. So I think this is Smith-Shawver with good stuff who might be in and out of spot starts versus Andrew Abbott, who they are handing a rotation spot to the rest of the year. So that's why I think that
the only pushback I can give you on that read, which I agreed with and was my first read, is that the corresponding move was Soroka getting sent down. And I suppose the way that you could be right is that Max Fried comes back.
They just moved him to the 60-day IL.
That's not a good sign.
Yes, I think that was retro.
He was already out. He was already out for half the season anyway.
That's like the DeGrom one. Like everyone's freaking out about DeGrom. Like, but he can come back.
They just now we have a better sense of when he might be back. You know,
it's just how the roster works. That's how you.
They needed the slot for Smith-Shawver to put him on the 40-man, but
they got Dodd and Schuster, and maybe they intertwine those guys. I mean, maybe I'm making too much about him not being able to give you starts.
Well, maybe they just give him the rotation spot till Fried is back.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
Soroka is down, and the stuff wasn't there, and I don't know when he's going to get it, but until he gets the stuff back, he's not back.
Is that a worry? Is that enough of a bet why you go with a guy who can pitch the rest of the season, and assuming that Shawver can't keep it? That's like my question to you guys with that is we all agree.
How do you want to use Smith-Shawver's innings best? Do you want him to be a starter for like 2 months and then a reliever in the playoffs? Yeah, I think that's the idea.
I think that's the team context, but like we all agree Smith-Shawver's stuff is the best here, is the bet. But is it enough that we don't think he's going to be able to stay in the rotation to take Abbott, or is his stuff too good? We say, screw it. We don't think about too much of the future. We know we got 2 or 3 starts. Let's bet on him over the season on Abbott. Because I think that is a decision that a lot of people are going to have to make.
I'm just one foot in front of the other. I see them both having rotation spots. I like Smith-Shawver's stuff better. I'm just gonna think about the now, and I'm just gonna take Smith-Shawver over Abbott.
I think that's how I look at it too. I'm playing more like a month at a time, or even a couple of weeks at a time, because within the chaos, like we were talking at the beginning of the show about Elly and the range of outcomes for,
Elder could go down. Anybody can go down.
Yeah. The range of outcomes for an elite prospect, a guy that was #1 on some lists and top 5 on everybody's list. There's a pretty wide range of outcomes for a player that good. The range of outcomes for any of these pitchers is much wider. And I mean, for Smith-Shawver, just the fact that he's in the big leagues this year at all is a big surprise. But I think because of what the Braves did last year with Harris and Grissom, that really makes me comfortable believing that they see him as their best option right now. But as we saw with Grissom this year at the beginning of the season, nothing's permanent. If they don't like what they see, if they feel like a veteran is a better option, they'll push that button and they'll make that adjustment if he's not ready. So there's a wide range of outcomes. So if you think in terms of my
model, I default towards fastballs. I like guys with really good fastballs. I think that some of the guys that we've seen, some of the outcomes we've seen this year have really flown from, who had a good fastball. I know that Bryce Miller is a bit of an exception to that, but Bobby Miller, Taj Bradley, there's some really good fastballs among the rookies that have succeeded. The difference between Smith-Shawver and Andrew Abbott for me is the fastball.
And one thing I throw into to your point, like, and you were kind of like creating this pseudo, like, hey, there could be this like consensus guy and there's nothing to read. Eury Perez could be gone in a week. Trevor Rogers just had I think like 15 swinging whiffs in his
Eury Perez
rehab
is
start.
Really struggling with the command, I think.
But he's getting away with a lot of stuff. Eury Perez, I think from a stuff perspective, is like my favorite that's up of all the guys. I would bet on him. But all of that said, the Marlins could just kind of just say, all right, you did a great job, kid. Whoop, take it easy. We'll talk to you later. And when Trevor Rogers comes back, and they could send him down. So it doesn't matter the prospect pedigree and how well they've gone in.
I think it's, we're going off track a little bit here. I don't know. We always do that. We could just call this the off track show.
Project off track.
But yeah, I think Braxton Garrett would go down first.
Braxton Garrett's been pretty good. I don't know. I don't think Eury's going anywhere. So I know what you're going with it. So you're probably actually right. I think this is just the dilemma. Edward Cabrera has reestablished who he was as well.
Dude, Edward Cabrera. Before, let me see, what's this one?
Remember our Edward Cabrera show like a month ago?
Yes,
11 walks in May. 5 starts.
Before 5/17, he'd never had consecutive starts with less than like 5 walks or something. Like, it was pretty incredible. And then in 5/17 against the Nationals, 6 strikeouts, 0 walks. At Colorado, 6 strikeouts, 1 walk. He did have some regression at Angels, 5 strikeouts, 4 walks. At Oakland, 10-1. Are these bad teams that he's not walking? Nationals, Rockies, and A's. Is it a matchup thing? It's so tempting though, because you're like, if he could command the ball,
he's starting to do
yet
it.
Another, dude with a capital D.
He's had in his career, Edward Cabrera has had 2 months so far where he's had a walk rate under 10%. End of last season, so September, October lumped together, 9.8%. It was in 27 2/3 innings, and just now in May, 9.4%. So it's happened twice. So 2 out of the last 3.
It's a bit of a marker. I mean, what did we find when we were looking through comps for
we found Daniel Cabrera and
the worst players ever.
We found all the guys that we used to like that we thought could be good that weren't good.
What was the number we were using? We were using his 14% walk rate.
Oh yeah,
we're using the career number because the career number is a problem. The larger sample is a concern.
But he'll play so much better at 9.8. Like, if he could get it to 9.8, even 10, then he's on a different list. He gets different comps.
Then he's just a high injury risk guy because he's had a bunch of arm stuff. So then he kicks the control concerns, and he's that electric guy that could come up and be a top 10 starter if he's healthy. But if he's healthy is carrying a ton of weight there, and you have to value him more like a 30 to 40 range starter.
Let me ask something. Who would you rather have rest of the season, AJ Smith-Shawver or Eury Perez?
Eury has more innings, has a really nice home park, and a really nice fastball. So I'm going to go with Eury.
Okay. It sounded like you were going in another direction because you were saying 2.25 ERA and the struggles.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to point out that Eury Perez has a 90 location plus. And Edward Cabrera has 100.
So this is actually a really difficult. So we, has brought this up many times on the show over the years. Even though the Verducci effect has been debunked, the management of young pitchers hasn't really evolved much past that. Like, as far as the increases, and the reasoning is, well, it's just how much more we give them. Like, the publicly stated reasons, at least, haven't changed a whole lot. The Marlins are 5 over 500. They've been fortunate in that. If you look at their Pythagorean record, they should be closer to 500, if not below 500. 8-2 in their last 10. Good young team, needs bats, has some pitching depth. I've made the case before that they should trade pitching as soon as they have enough healthy pitching to deal someone and make the offense better.
And I have some sourcing that says that Rogers has been on the block.
Right. So all of that is normal and fine and great. But if you have to call the shots with Eury Perez, and the playoffs are a possibility for you, and his long-term future is important, all of these things are a real decision. So if you're Kim Ng and you're in that front office and you're trying to come up with a good plan, what is the smartest thing you can do with Eury? Do you back off him as a starter and use him for an inning or two at a time at the big league level? I don't think sending him down and having him throw at AAA does a whole lot. I mean, yes, you can control the innings without hurting your big league club that way, and you have the options, so it's there. But isn't there a case to be made that if you're going to manipulate the innings in a way just to keep them fresh for later in the year, that you skip them on off days and use them in a relief role for a while everyone's healthy?
The All-Star game gambit, right?
You'll
send
see
him
that
down
for
right
sure.
before the All-Star game. Basically don't pitch him for 2 weeks and then ramp him back up. So he takes like 3 weeks off in the middle of the season. Just for context, Eury Perez, 78 innings in 2021, 77 innings in 2022, and already at 55 innings this year. The sort of established number that we've sort of seen is like kind of plus 20%, plus 20, plus 30 innings. So you let's say you have 105 innings for Eury Perez, and for Smith-Shawver, you've got something similar but minus 10 innings, right? Because he had 68 innings last year, I thought I said. Smith-Shawver had 68.2 innings last year and has used up 28, 35, 37 of them. So you could get Smith-Shawver, I think, to 90 innings. And you could get Eury, I think, to 100, 110.
Same kind of problem, though, for both of these teams. And maybe your option is to say, well, if you're the Marlins, we don't really know if we're going to be a playoff caliber team come August, but our best chance of even being in that position when we can do something about it at the deadline is to use him now when he's healthy and just max him out and then say, we hit August 8th or whatever day he runs out of innings.
He's going to the pen.
He's in the pen or he's just shut down for the season, and we have enough pitching and we're going to get by without him. I don't know.
You could they go to 6-man. I mean, they could just do their thing, do the 3-week, move to maybe a 6-man towards the back end of the year. And then, like you guys are saying, if you're going to make a real run, maybe it is back into the bullpen, because you wouldn't want to do that now and then try to you can't stretch back out. It's like once you do it, once you open that, you're done. Like if they move him in a bullpen role, then you got to go through stretching. And I think that's a bad thing for a young guy. So I think they're going to work it through, but it does open up this conversation
but
that
if you're
like
the Marlins and you make it to the playoffs, you're going to want to have him in the playoffs.
I can't even mentally have the like rational conversation around like, okay, well, we can get them to maybe 150. Just best players go out there. Like these guys are professional athletes. Right. They're doing that. Like I get there's arm constraint issues and stuff like that, but I can't even have a normal conversation with, if you're winning and you have this great guy, you can't send them away, and you can't cost your team and all of this just off of making sure you don't go 15 or
especially
10
when the science isn't necessarily there. Right?
It's crazy to me.
I think with Eury Perez, one difference is that Smith-Shawver had 68 innings, and then the year before had like, I don't know, he had 2 in Major League Baseball, in professional baseball. That must have been the year he was drafted, so maybe he had some college innings, but Eury Perez has hit a level that he's met twice in a row, so he's at least made it to 75 innings twice in a row. So I think he could make it to, you might be able to push him to 120, but even if you're pushing him to 120, that gives you 75 more innings this year. That doesn't give you enough to get through the whole year.
It gives you 15 more turns through the rotation at 5 innings apiece. And you need about 22 turns to the rotation to get through the rest of the season.
But what if you 6-man it?
That's what they should do. I think that's the move. That's what I would choose for now, because someone's going to get hurt. And if no one gets hurt, someone could get traded, and you can solve the problem a little later. You kind of defer it to a future week or a future month.
And the problem with 6-manning is usually that you have an ace that you want, that you don't want to have less of. And I'm not saying you don't I'm not saying that Sandy Alcantara is bad. I'm not saying that. I'm saying is this rotation is actually fairly good all the way through. So it's not like the Mets, where like if the Mets go to a 6-man, they get less of Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer and more of Tyler McGill. With the Marlins, they have so many young guys that maybe they'll even pitch better on more rest. Maybe that'll help Sandy, and then you might have like a really dominant pitching rotation that makes sense 1 through 6.
Yeah. So a lot to be determined there, but the innings concerns for both AJ Smith-Shawver and Eury Perez are very real based on what we've seen in the past. Shawver, is a high school kid drafted just a couple of years ago.
So that's that high school year where he has 2 years. He has like 3 innings in the complex, Smith-Shawver.
How much does that even matter? How much does your high school workload matter? If you're trying to if you're going back 2 or 3 years looking at workload, and one of those years is the senior year of high school, and you threw over 100 innings that year, does that mean you can go over that because you've done it before and you didn't break?
I went to a college game last night. I saw Stanford beat Texas A&M. The guy who pitched the last 4 innings was the best pitcher for Stanford this year. Quinn Matthews, I believe his name was. I'm more sure about the first name because we were yelling Quinn. But Quinn had pitched Friday 3 or 4 innings, and it was Monday, and he pitched 4 innings, I think.
That's college baseball for you.
I mean, look at the arguably would be the number 1 pick if Dylan Cruz wasn't there at LSU. Paul Skeens the other day,
they let him throw 100 in like the 8th or something,
and 24 in the 9th. He was in the 9th. He went almost
124 pitches.
124 pitches, and it was into the 9th. And this is a guy that is going to be he would be number 1 if Dylan Cruz wasn't there, but he'll be number 2. He'll be the number 2 overall pick. And just think about and that is actually one of those weird things to think about in pitching development. Like, I think the Nationals have that pick. Are the Nationals going to want to taper things down with the usage that's going on in college? So it's a both side argument of like, maybe high school and college usage is part of the reason they want to really baby, but also it could be something to say, well, these guys have had the workload before. Like, you can press these guys a little bit harder than, these really stringent markers that you guys set for innings and amount of pitches and stuff. Like, these guys can do it, but I know it's the fear of injury and long-term development and stuff. But the Paul Skeens stuff was wild.
I just think it's awful. There's so much at stake for pitchers to stay healthy, get drafted, get that big bonus, and get their professional career started. And for the college coach, it's like, hey, I just want to win.
Yeah, I don't think there's a major leaguer that's thrown 120 this year, right? Not even close.
It'd be a short list if anyone's done it. I haven't seen anyone do it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. A couple of things that were on the rundown. We'll fly through these in rapid fire fashion. Luken Baker is getting a look in St. Louis. He was on a 54 home run pace at AAA. That's with a 162 game schedule, which they don't play at that level. He's already listed by Fangraphs as a DH. Welsh, I know a guy can't play a spot defensively if when he's debuting in the big leagues in the right-hand corner of his Fangraphs page, it just says DH. But is there enough hit tool for Baker to actually get to that power consistently and be an impact big leaguer despite his defensive limitations?
Yeah, I mean, the only other place he could play is first, but they kind of got that short up in St. Louis. So it's kind of a little bit covered, so they don't have to think too much into it. Like when he first came out, he hit 300 in his first professional stint. Kind of thought that was going to happen, but then it failed. He failed to be over 250 for the rest of his minor league career until this year, where he just started hitting. Sometimes the things click late. He's got monstrous power. 3 hits, I think, in that first stint here. So there's something there, but I also think like it's the same level of like Juan Yepez. It's like that. Like, Juan Yepez has a little bit more defensive ability. I think he's actually a better hitter, but there is pure raw power to Luken Baker. He's somewhere between maybe the Crons, Kevin Cron, and he can go play in Japan, to maybe CJ Cron and it working out, like somewhere in that spectrum.
Tough in St. Louis too, because
26-year-old righty.
But you look at Nolan Gorman as a guy that you don't want necessarily playing defense every day. Alec Burleson, who's been an up and down guy, isn't really a good outfielder. Yepez, who you mentioned.
This is a team that's supposed to pick it everywhere, and they're starting to draw people up that don't pick it anymore.
Having other guys with similar limitations also makes it less likely this could work out. But hey,
they got a guy named Moises Gomez who's been kind of kicking around, but he just was one of the minor league home run leaders last year. Kind of started off slow. He just hit 13 homers in May. He started back up again.
Wow.
That's one of those guys that, like, I feel like Gomez would maybe be a better bet than Luken Baker. Like, you literally only have Baker up for the bat, and I don't know
what was the corresponding move.
I think didn't Newt Bar go on the IL?
Yeah.
Was that it?
Bar's on the IL.
I think that one hurt Eno when it happened. Like, I think when Newt Bar is hurt, I think Eno is hurt too.
Lower back contusion. This sounds to me like a short-term move.
Yeah, it does. Henry Davis got bumped up to AAA. Now, you want a player that we can, now that Elly's up, if we want a player that we want to hit the table for and say, hey, wait, let's get a look at Henry Davis. Pirates still hanging around in the NL Central. Come on, is this going to happen? Are we a few weeks away from possibly seeing Henry Davis? We could use another boost in the catcher pool.
You know what I want to see that's going to show up fairly soon on Fangraphs is AAA Max EV from Davis. I think that would be somewhat relevant piece of information because, we have the 70-70 raw power grade from Fangraphs and a 50-60 game power. I want to see some actual numbers on that. I would love to see that. But what's really interesting to me is the guy that has a 35-45 hit tool grade on Fangraphs has an 18.7% strikeout rate with a 7.4 swing strike rate. Henry Davis does in Double-A. I mean, that's pretty good for a guy with no hit tool.
Also interesting, they brought him up to play with. I mean, before the season, everybody only cared about Andy Rodriguez. No one cared about Henry Davis, and Andy's been struggling, hitting under 250, 4 homers, 4 stolen bases, strikeout rate's still fine, but Henry Davis was playing a little bit of left field in Double-A, so be very curious to see the mixture of what's going to go on between Indy and Henry Davis, and if he beats
Andy
can
play a lot of positions too. So
that's what we thought. I always thought if you were going to say one of these guys was going to play at a position, it's like that's Indy. Like let Indy go play in the middle infield, and Henry Davis can be the catcher. But it might be the opposite, and it'll just be interesting to see when one is catching, the others maybe playing in the field somewhere.
At AAA so far, Andy has only played catcher. I do know that part of that has been, and part of, as I understand it, some of the sort of struggles offensively for Andy is that the real thing that they wanted him to work on in AAA this year was the defense. I mean, that's not saying anything that is not somewhat obvious from just, kind of, he has a 45-55 field on Fangraphs, so that's why they played him constantly at catcher, which is weird because so is Henry Davis the better catcher? So he comes up. You're going to see something happen here, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe Andy will start playing other positions because they're like, no, Henry's the better catcher. And so we're going to make a decision now. You know what, Andy? You're a multi guy. And no, I'm saying Andy is the multi guy and Henry is the catcher. But since they're both at the same level, we're going to see something there. So I would watch the positional game logs almost as much as the results.
You know what's so fascinating, and not to go on a whole thing because we got to go, but like I'm so intrigued at how catchers specifically, the offense can trail when they focus on defense. This exact same thing happened with Carson Kelly, and I remember him talking
not that many
about
hours in the day. Like it's really hard to prepare for both.
When Carson Kelly was drafted by the Cardinals, he was an offensive bat, and he was so behind on his defense. He put all his focus in there, and his bat completely trailed behind. And it took him like 2 years to get that offense to catch back up to the focus that was being put on defense. I just don't feel like that we see that anywhere else. The closest thing to positional players have is when they go from being a contact hitter to trying to hit from more power. And then you'll see them like struggle and try to move through that. But you don't see like fielders have offensive woes while they're learning to play another position. It's just specifically catcher learning to be more of a defensive side.
I mean, at least the announcers talk about this. I don't know if I've seen a study on this, but I've seen announcers talk about taking your defensive struggles on the field.
Yeah. And maybe it is
taking
more
your
prevalent.
Defensive struggles to the plate. That's a thing that it's like sort of collective wisdom, but it's not something I've seen necessarily studied.
I think it's a thing that could happen though.
You're not feeling good.
It's an effect of compounding your errors, right? You make one mistake, it turns into a few more. It gets you into a funk, and you
take it to the bat. Yeah,
it's going to be different. I mean, people are going to vary a lot in how they cope with those micro failures and maybe some larger failures along the way. But I think Davis and Rodriguez, how they're used at AAA is going to shed some light on how the Pirates might actually see them fitting in together at the big league level. And I think we could see both in the next few weeks. They're in first place as the show starts today. They're not just hanging around the NL Central.
And they just swept the Cardinals.
Oh,
congratulations to Pittsburgh.
I mean,
that put them back in the basement.
There are weird things in this world that bring me joy, and the Pirates sweeping the Cardinals just warms my heart. It's
makes
like
sense as a little bit of an NL Central guy over here.
Puppy swarm videos, the Pirates sweeping the
Puppies.
That's makes me so happy. I'm sorry, Cardinals fans. It's just I have to root against you. It's just the way I have to be.
You're born into this.
I was born into it. I moved into it, I guess. I moved into the rivalry. All right, a couple mailbag questions real quick before we sign off. Carrie wants to know, in a league where you can pick up minor league players during the season with exciting new pop-up players, how long do you hold on to guys like Matt Mervis and Joey Wiemer, guys who are getting the opportunity at the big league level? Is it higher the pedigree, the longer the hold time? Or if you have guys like Carlos Jorge, Ben Brown, AJ Smith-Shawver, who was in the minors at the time this question was written, do you actually go out and take a chance on the next wave to be called up? How do you make those types of decisions? This particular league is 12 teams with 240 minor league players rostered. So that gets pretty deep.
I mean, I would just say like a higher pedigree. I try to not be as turnstile, especially if is this a keeper or
yes,
they okay. I wasn't sure if this was like redraft. So yeah, like top 50 prospects in struggles. I'm not looking to cut Matt Mervis immediately for what I would assume is a post 250 level guy that you could pick up. But in redraft, if you were holding a bunch of prospects, I would probably, 2 or 3 weeks. And if you see major struggles, like Mervis would be someone you could probably move on from. And I would want to pick up some of those pitchers. I'm not sure I'm answering that super great, but like, I don't want to let go of the high pedigreed rostered prospects after 2 or 3 weeks in any keeper based format, like Matt Mervis specifically.
Yeah, Mervis is particularly tough because the gap between what you would do in a long-term league and what you would do in just a 12-team redraft league that doesn't have that sort of depth, it's a really tough call. He's 4th among rookies in barrel percentage, minimum 50 plate appearances, but he's striking out just over 33% of the time. So he's had this slow start. He's probably going to keep sitting against lefties. Waiting on that in a more shallow league is pretty frustrating. Wiemer's the really tough sort of player for me to evaluate because
he's actually useful too. Like he's being useful right now. I mean, 6 stolen bases. I mean, 9 stolen bases, 6 homers, right? Like,
and if you take a look at the bat over the last couple of weeks, it seems like he's made a few adjustments. It's a better stretch from him offensively. So you have this power speed combo. It comes with a bad average right now. He's a great defensive center fielder, which has been a really pleasant surprise for me. I didn't realize he was that good. Once Garrett Mitchell went down, I thought they were going to be in trouble rotating through center field, but Wiemer has been fantastic.
Will he be in trouble though when Garrett Mitchell comes back?
That's not happening.
Mitchell's coming back this year.
Yeah, maybe probably not until next year. And if it happens, it's going to be September. I mean, I think Sal Frelick could eventually enter the equation. And then we've talked about the possibility of Churio just being one of the other big prospects that because of team need, maybe he enters the equation and that hurts Wiemer's playing time. But Tyrone Taylor's hurt again. You look at the way that team's built. I think Wiemer is like solid. And I think the growing pains you're getting in year one are not surprising given some of the flaws we've seen. But he might be another good example of a player that, because he struck out a lot in the upper levels in the minor leagues, people look past the power speed combo. I mean, 26 for 27 at Double-A as a base stealer last year. Sign me up. That's fantastic with decent power, like good power on top of that. The setup is a little odd. As Eno has pointed out, it's a little odd. It's one of the weirdest setups.
Like a little person, but he's big. And he kind of does this weird little setup.
He squishes in. He was worse in the AFL, and he fixed this bit. He had his hand. He would do the bat out more,
he does that.
And his hand, but he did it like more prominent. And so the first time I saw it, I was like, I hate this. This will never work. And then he kind of adjusted it.
I don't remember the specifics of who the pickups were, but like if I was going to pick up a pitcher for a hitter, I would want more sample out of the hitter, especially if they'd been ranked in the top 50. Now, if they'd been ranked outside of the top 100, and we've got this hot young pitcher, then maybe I'd make that jump. So yes, I think pedigree matters, but then also some of the small sample numbers matter. The barrel numbers matter, the swing strike rate matters. And so those things are going in all sorts of different directions for Mervis and Wiemer. And that's difficult, but you can look that Mervis never really had a swing strike rate this high in the minor leagues. And so that should be going in a different direction. And Wiemer and Mervis both barrel the ball. So that's good. That would buy them more time on my roster. The more you can barrel the ball, the more that I can see something that's different from the minor leagues and for what you're doing in the major leagues in a small sample, the more I can be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to wait a little bit longer to see if Mervis is going to strike out less. And I'm going to wait a little bit longer to see if Weimer, what Weimer's batting average is going to settle down as. Because I think he's going to whiff, but he barrels and he's fast. Maybe there could be a little bit more batting. If Weimer can hit 230, he's actually a pretty good prospect. I mean, he's a pretty good player. 230, 2020, yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, that works. I mean,
230, 2030.
That plays in a lot of leagues. Although, as the rules have shown, like the average league wide is up, right? Compared to past years where average is down. So a 230 hurts you a little more in this environment than it did in past years.
And the steals help you a little bit less in this environment with more steals out there.
But there's room to move up too, because that lineup is a land of opportunities, especially with all the injuries that we've talked about on this show. Thanks for that question, Carrie. One last question from Johnny. Which side of a keep forever deal do you like more? This is head-to-head categories league with OBP. Teams can keep up to 7 players for as long as they want. Are you on the Michael Harris and O'Neill Cruz side, or are you on the Bo Bichette side? Welsh, I'll go to you first.
Ooh, that one hurts. Well, the Michael Harris side is what makes it so difficult because his struggles are very much in everybody's face, especially for keeper leagues. I don't want to contextualize this because, like, if I'm like a winning team, there's no way I'm giving up Bo Bichette, even to get 2 pieces with Harris's struggles. But like from a pure keeper standpoint, getting O'Neill Cruz and Michael Harris, I think O'Neill Cruz can still be an absolute stud and compete against Bo Bichette once healthy. And then also getting the gamble on Michael Harris for him to rebound on what he was. I would lean on that side, but that is really tough because Bo Bichette is Bo Bichette. I mean, that's top 20 dynasty keeper. Cruz has a little ways to go to be that, but then you're also getting your second bet. I think that is a trade on both sides. It would be difficult. I guess I lean O'Neill Cruz thinking about keeper, but no way I'm trading Bo Bichette if I'm winning.
Yeah, the stolen bases seem to be dropping out of Bo Bichette's bag of tricks.
At the old age of 25.
Yeah. And so if I recalibrate and think of him as a 300, 25 to 30 homer hitting, 5 to 10 stolen base guy, yeah, I still want him. I'm going to take him. This is a classic, I think. It's hard when the upside is good. But you know what? I'm not sure the upside for either of the 2 players you're getting is a 330 homer hitting, 5 stolen base shortstop. I know that Cruz is, yes, he can hit that home run mark. He can surpass that stolen base mark. I don't think O'Neill Cruz is ever going to hit 300.
Ooh, DVR, are you going to go with me? I feel like you're dancing around here on video.
Harris has been unlucky. I did one note. Harris has been, I think, a fair amount of what's going on with Harris is just bad. It's just unluck.
Yeah.
I thought that, I talked to, I think, Keith Law on, it was the Friday episode of the Athletic Baseball Show. And then I saw a couple Braves games over the weekends, and I saw Harris smoke 2 balls that should have been hits that weren't. I was like, wow, this is the micro sample validating what I thought
rate,
I saw. It's the same as last year.
Strikeout rate as last year.
He's walking more. He's doing a little better in that department. If Michael Harris was still hurt in this 37 games of what looks like bad luck hadn't happened, you'd feel a lot differently about this trade. If you're only looking back at last year and say, hey, a 10% barrel rate, elite center fielder, one of the best teams in the league.
I'm going to get my 300 average from the Harris side.
Room for growth in terms of K rate and walk rate. We've seen one of those things already improve. I think when we talked about Harris throughout last season, I saw a lot of Bo Bichette's approach with him, where it's like, okay, this is power speed. It's coming from the left side, but
not all pull.
It's not perfect, but it works. Like, this is a really good player. I think I would take this. I'm almost tempted to say that you could maybe even squeeze out more for Bo Bichette right now, but I think it's a pretty fair trade because I think both Harris and Cruz would be in that keep 7 group. What I'm really curious to know is if the team that's trading the 2 players actually has too many keepers. That's why they're trying to pull this off. And if that's the case, you can definitely leverage getting something else back out of that.
Also,
team.
The missing information is who does the second keeper push off of yours?
Right. Who's not on your keeper list?
That is very important.
One back.
Yeah, it is important because Michael Harris is. I don't want to call Michael Harris a slam dunk. Last year, this is a slam dunk, top 7 keeper. But where things are at, we don't want to say he's a 100% slam dunk keeper. So who does he push off? Michael
and they're in these keep 7 situations, these small keeper situations. I don't know. I've put together some packages that you might be like, what? You gave up these 5 players for this one? And it's like, yeah, the one is better than the 5 is my keeper situation. That's all I care about. I'm just trying to get to 7 keepers, I
do lean on best player in trades, and Bichette is the best player, but this one particularly, I got to stick on.
It's closer than a lot.
It is very close.
Really, really tough. Make it 2 votes on the O'Neill Harris side, 1 on the Eno side with Bichette. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry to go against you, buddy. Send donuts next time if you want me to vote for you. I can be persuaded with deep fried sugar. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder that you can get a subscription to The Athletic for $2 a month at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. On Twitter, you can find Eno at Eno Saris. You can find Welsh at IsItTheWelsh. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Wednesday.